Garden Basics with Farmer Fred is brought to you by Smart Pots, the original lightweight, long-lasting fabric plant container. It's made in the USA. Visit smartpots.com/Fred for more information and a special discount. That's smartpots.com/Fred. Welcome to the Garden Basics with Farmer Fred podcast. If you're just a beginning gardener or you want good gardening information, well, you've come to the right spot. Are you looking for easy-to-grow succulents? Succulents that'll grow in a wide variety of climates? We cover the basics for growing these unthirsty plants both outdoors and indoors. How about spicing up your salsa garden this year with the tomato relative, Tomatillos? We have tips for growing them and a warning. We're podcasting from Barking Dog Studios here in the beautiful Abutilon jungle in suburban Purgatory. It's the Garden Basics with Farmer Fred podcast, brought to you today by Smart Pots and Dave Wilson Nursery. And we'll do it all in under 30 minutes. Let's go. Have you thought about growing succulents? Do you know anything about succulents? Well, here you go. Some basic information about growing succulents. We're talking with Sacramento County Master Gardener Teresa Roberts. She is also with the Sacramento Cactus and Succulent Society, so she knows her succulents. And Teresa, boy, you talk about an easy care plant. They don't get much easier than succulents.
They do not get much easier in succulents if you just take into consideration a few of their preferences.
All right. What would first of all, let's define what a succulent is.
A succulent is a plant that has water-conserving properties. And that water conservation can occur in leaves, stems, or even in parts of the root system. So it's not like a tight scientific kind of definition, but that's so that they're plants that tend to have capacity for holding water more than other plants.
Yeah, they're generally sort of a thicker leaf.
A thicker leaf can be thick, fleshy roots as well, can be thick, fleshy stems, and even those codexes, right, at the juncture of the roots and the stems.
So let's talk about some easy-growing succulents for the outdoors. Now, it's kind of hard to pick any that would work all the way across the country. You got to know your zone. You got to know how cold it gets there. So let's just talk maybe some easy-care succulents that can take light frost, something that you might see in USDA zones 9 and 8, possibly some areas of 7, that may be able to take a few cold winter days and bounce back.
Okay, well, your large groups that are going to give you the broadest range of those kinds of plants are going to be some Crassulas and lots of sedums. Now, one of the challenges, you can't say like a particular one to get, because both of those categories of plants are highly hybridized, and new hybrids coming out all the time. So it's knowing largely that those two category names, Crassulas and sedums, when you see that on a plant label, time for your ears to perk up and say, that's likely to work.
Describe the basic Crassula. Are these low-growing plants? Are they spreading plants? Do they flower?
They all flower, and they largely tend to be smaller plants, lower growing plants. But there are, of course, there are, of course, like Crassula arborescens. It can make like a small shrub, 2 feet wide, a foot high, gets these beautiful white star-shaped flowers on it, beautiful foliage with a kind of mint green leaves with a red edge, and those can be beautiful plants. So you can look and find low growing. A lot of them are available in to use for ground cover applications. You can use them in groups of individual plants that may set up 6 to 12 inches high, and you can get them into the small shrub size, and then you can get ones that will grow more even into like a small tree form.
I have seen succulents out here at the Fair Oaks Horticulture Center. Some are in full sun, some, like what we're staring at here, in full shade. And you wonder, well, what is the light requirement for most succulents?
Well, it varies. And if I had to say, one of the two biggest problems with people being successful with succulents is people believe and understand that they are water conserving, that they don't need a lot of water, and they conclude that therefore you can put them in hot baking sun, like south facing sun and west facing sun for us out here in California. Those two kinds of exposures are going to get extremely hot, and many of the succulents just bake and dry up. You can just keep pouring water on them, but that's not going to take care of that problem. So it's thinking about some, and that's why some people like, not only does it set the succulents off from an aesthetic point of view, you can also provide little mini areas of some shading by planting underneath another tree that's open, by using some decorative rocks, by using little mounds of soil, thinking about something to break up that sun. The second biggest challenge that people have is they water too much. People want to take care of their plants. They want to be loving to them. They want to care for them. They want to nurture them. And at the first signs of distress, people are likely to conclude, oh, it needs more water. So too much sun and too much water are the biggest worries that I think I can identify about people being successful with having their succulents do everything they'd like them to do in their gardens.
Many areas of the country also have heavy clay soil, which can retain moisture for a long period of time, and that's not really what a succulent's basic needs include. So are succulents really best for containers or raised beds?
Not necessarily, but you do raise up another point. When we think about all plants, in my mind, I think about light, which we've already touched on, the heat and the light that go together. We already touched upon the water, about having restraint. If in doubt, don't is kind of what I say. And now you've touched on the third thing that is really the basic plant culture, which is the soil conditions. And indeed, we do have in lots of areas of the Sacramento County, we have heavy clay soils. We also have in lots of areas soils that have a lot of rock in them. And in certain areas, we have soils that have a lot of minerals in them. So with respect to succulents, their most essential soil requirement is that soil be well draining. So pot culture makes it perfect for succulents, because you can establish that well draining soil by what you put into the pot. But they grow really well in the soil, even if you have clay soil. But what you will need to do, most succulents are not real deeply rooted. And so if you take out some of that soil and mix in something to help the drainage, we're very fond of the use of pumice, lava, small chunks of lava rock. And I have colleagues, friends, that they plant their succulents in pure pumice.
Wow.
And in the ground. And so, if you plant them in the ground, you can get by with more drainage increasing properties, because you have the moisture conserving nature of the soil itself. So they're well suited for pots or soil, but with soil, and probably 8 to 12 inches down is going to be sufficient to try to get what I call that lofty, fluffy soil that they love.
We've talked about crassulas. You mentioned sedums. Talk a little bit about sedums. How big do they get? Do they obviously flower? Talk about that.
Sedums tend to be in the smaller group. They tend to be the little precious succulents that make lovely dish gardens. They make really great displays in trough-like planters, in wide, flat kinds of planters. You can mix a variety of them and make just a little charming elfin complex of sedums in the ground. You can also get sedums that they tend to be small, plants, but they will cover, one sedum plant can cover a whole big area to 2 to 3 feet.
So sedums then would be a good choice for those that are just starting off in the world of succulents.
Yes. And we also see a lot of growing interest in succulents for people who live in condominiums, apartments, or new homes that often tend to have very, very small yards. You can even can grow some succulents inside. If you can get just some good light coming in through a bright windowsills, a lot of homes don't have those anymore, but a small table by a window. And two types of plants that we haven't spoken of yet that do very well for inside home growing are haworthias and gasterias. Tend to be darker green color, thick fleshy leaves, and so they can do better in really what are can be low light kinds of conditions.
By the way, if you're scribbling notes and are wondering about the spelling of some of these terms like haworthia or I can't even say it.
Gasteria.
Well, I know, but it's also going to be in the show notes because we do a transcription of each episode. So if you're looking for exactly what we're talking about, read the transcription for today's episode. Indoor growing of succulents, windows that work best, south and west facing exposure,
yes.
East spacing?
Well, south facing ones, east facing ones with bright morning light, because plants are often up close to the window pane. That glass gets very hot and radiates off. Even if they're new glass, so that it's double pane, it can still get very hot. So a western facing window with succulents in it late in the afternoon in our hot summer days can be a very hot place. You might even want to think about how succulents can be part of your easy changing of your decor, because you can have them in a south and west facing window in the fall and winter time, and then move them to an area where you can still get bright light but not as much heat, and then you have a whole new room decor.
There are a lot of commercial indoor succulent soil mixes to use. Do you recommend those? And how do you improve the drainage in those situations?
Thank you for asking that question. Yes, most large garden centers will contain a mix that is designated for cactus, maybe palm trees and succulents. That mix is going to have less organic material, meaning less humus, leaf mold, or peat in it, and peat's a whole nother issue in it. And they're also more likely to have some larger pieces, larger particles. My experience with those, so I always amend them and I add in more material for drainage. Typically, what I like is pumice. Pumice and perlite, let's keep those two things separate. I do not prefer perlite because that's the one, if you've ever had it, it's white and floats to the top, and you dunk it again and it still floats to the top. And you can find pumice is harder to find. I often buy it at feed stores because they use it in stalls for animals to absorb animal moisture from inside stalls.
Perlite looks like styrofoam bits, and pumice is more rock-like.
Yes, it's and some people argue that the pumice, because it's like pulverized lava rock, but it's white. That actually people that don't like it might say to you that it actually is a place where microorganisms of greenery, algae and stuff can get in there. And that can sometimes happen, but that is a sure sign of what, folks? Too much water.
And the other problem with indoor succulent gardens is you need that good drainage, and a lot of people don't have the proper drainage on their indoor plants.
Right, and they're reluctant to get that drainage because they don't want that water coming out of the bottom of the pot because they got it on a finished piece of furniture. That's good to be caring about that, but you can always get those little plastic liners to put them in. Clay saucers won't work because the water will permeate in them. Flat trays, you can put them on a tray with pebbles on there, but you really, ideally, if you have them outdoors, you want them just to be free draining, but you can't do that indoors. So think about collecting that extra moisture, not preventing it, but in a way that it's not with a porous material.
Probably having a larger tray beneath it with that pumice rock in that tray to collect the water as it drains from the pot.
Yes, that could work very nice. And that can be quite decorative too.
Mm-hmm. All right, so there's a lot of solutions to your succulent issues. They're still one of the easiest plants to grow. Teresa Roberts is a master gardener in Sacramento County. We're here at the Fair Oaks Horticulture Center that, by the way, have a lot of succulents out here among everything else they grow here.
And we're just beginning to develop some more focused areas for succulents where we will be looking at both using both beautiful plants, but also creating a beautiful environment for those plants to be situated in. All the way from mulch to soil to rocks to plants. Come out to the Fair Oaks Horticulture Center and see our work grow.
You could even plan a vacation around it, especially for Harvest Day at the Fair Oaks Horticulture Center. It's always the first Saturday in August, and it is a wonderful, wonderful event, one of the best gardening events you can come to at the Fair Oaks Horticulture Center on the first Saturday every August. It's called Harvest Day. I hope to see you out here sometime, no matter where you might live.
And also, just to whet your appetite, and this is the right time of year, the first weekend in May, every year except only 1 year off for COVID, we will be having a cactus and other succulent sale at the Shepherd Garden and Arts Center down at McKinley Park. That's the first weekend in May. I don't have the exact dates off the tip of my tongue, but we will be having over 15 vendors there selling common and rare cactus and other succulents. We have people there selling handmade, beautiful art pots. You can buy plants anywhere from $5 to several hundred. So we have something for everybody's budget, and you will be mesmerized by the variety you can see there that weekend.
We'll have a link to that event coming up in the show notes in the Garden Basics podcast. Teresa Roberts, thanks so much for your time.
And thank you for your time.
You've heard me talk about the benefits of Smart Pots, the original award-winning fabric container. Smart Pots are sold around the world and are proudly made 100% right here in the USA. Smart Pots is the oldest and still the best of all the fabric plant containers that you might find. Many of the imitators are selling cheaply made fabric pots that fall apart quickly. Not Smart Pots. There are satisfied Smart Pot owners who have been using the same Smart Pots for over a decade, actually approaching 20 years. When you choose Smart Pot fabric containers, you know you'll be having a superior growing experience with the best product on the market. And your plants will appreciate Smart Pots too. Because of the 1 million microscopic holes in Smart Pots, your soil will have better drainage and the roots will be healthier. They won't be going round and round on the outside of the soil ball like you see in so many plastic pots. The air pruning qualities of Smart Pots creates more branching of the roots, filling more of the usable soil in the Smart Pot. Smart Pots are available at independent garden centers and select Ace and True Value hardware stores nationwide. To find a store near you or to buy online, visit smartpots.com/Fred. And don't forget that /Fred part. On that page are details about how, for a limited time, you can get 10% off your Smart Pot order by using the coupon code FRED. Use it at checkout from the Smart Pot store. Visit smartpots.com/Fred for more information about the complete line of Smart Pots lightweight, colorful, award-winning fabric containers. And don't forget that special Farmer Fred 10% discount. Smart Pots, the original award-winning fabric planter. Go to smartpots.com/Fred. If you haven't shopped at your favorite independently owned nursery lately, well, you're missing out. Now arriving are Dave Wilson Nursery's excellent lineup of farmers market favorites. It's great tasting and healthy fruit and nut varieties. They're already potted up and ready to be planted. We're talking about almonds, blackberries, blueberries, boysenberries, figs, grapes, hops, kiwi, mulberries, olives, pomegranates, and much more. Oh, you want more? Well, here you go. Your favorite Dave Wilson bare root deciduous fruit trees are arriving. Peaches, plums, cherries, including my favorite, the plum apricot cross, the pluot. Wholesale grower Dave Wilson Nursery has probably the best lineup of great tasting fruit and nut trees of any grower in the United States. Find out more at their website, davewilson.com. And while you're there, check out all the videos they have on how to plant and grow all their delicious varieties of fruit and nut trees. Plus, at davewilson.com, you're going to find the nursery nearest you that carries Dave Wilson's plants. Your harvest to better health begins at davewilson.com.
Hi, my name is Brenda Terry, and I listen to Farmer Fred every week. I really, really enjoy it, and I have learned a lot. For next summer, I'm going to be growing tomatillos. rather than tomatoes because of my health. I can't eat tomatoes anymore. And I'm hoping you could cover a little bit about tomatillos in a spring episode. Thank you very much and keep up the good work.
Well, Brenda, thanks so much for the question. You can be like Brenda and leave a question on SpeakPipe too. Go to speakpipe.com/garden basics. It's easy. Give it a try. You can even call us and leave a message if you'd like. 916-292-8964. 916-292-8964. Email? Sure. Send it to fred@farmerfred.com. You can leave a question at Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter as well. You'll find links to all those in today's show notes. Debbie Flower is here, our favorite retired college horticultural professor, which I guess you better trademark that phrase now since people are
asking me about it when they hear my voice in strange places. Yes.
Well, good. All right. So Brenda has a question about tomatillos. Brenda, we're sorry that you're allergic to tomatoes, but tomatillos are kind of a close relative.
Yeah, they are. My husband has a problem eating tomatoes as well. And so we don't in our house. And I am reluctant to feed him tomatillos. Tomatillos are in the same family as tomatoes, which is the Solanaceae family, along with peppers, eggplant, potatoes, tobacco. And they are also contain the chemical solanine, which could be something that is causing at least my husband's allergic problems with tomatoes and potatoes, etc. Brenda did not say what her response was to tomatoes that was negative, but I would caution her to be careful eating tomatillos.
Maybe test them out first.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Buy a bunch and eat them and see what happens. Or I don't know. That's not medical advice. I'm not a doctor and I don't play one on the podcast.
Same here.
Yeah.
But she could grow them. They're very easy to grow and they're a fun plant. And if turns out she can't eat them, I'm sure there would be other people interested in trying them out.
Some would consider it a weed.
I haven't met anybody who would say that.
You're looking at them.
Why is that? Do they take over?
If you forget to harvest some,
okay,
and they get buried in the detritus around the ground, or the birds pick them up, and all of a sudden there's little tomatillo plants sprouting everywhere.
Oh, okay.
But
because
maybe
the seeds are inside of the fruit.
Yeah. But tomatillos are easy to grow, but it does take two to tango, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. They have to cross-pollinate. They do not recognize their own pollen, and in order for a fruit to form, pollination has to occur in the flower. So viable pollen, useful pollen has to get to the tomatillo plant, and the only place that's going to come from is another tomatillo plant.
But it can be the same variety. It doesn't have to be a different variety.
It can be the same or different. Tomatillos ripen to green, sort of a yellowish color, purple. There are different varieties of tomatillos. So you can grow two of the same. You can grow two different ones. Either way, you will get that cross-pollination, which will be done by insects, particularly bees. So you want a bee-friendly garden. So have other things around that attract bees, flowers, etc. I always have some borage growing around my vegetable garden because the bees love that, and it blooms pretty much all the time. But some people call borage a weed as well. Be aware of that. It has not been an issue for me, but for some people it is. But have other flowers around that attract the bees. The bees will feed on those flowers and then find your tomatillos and do some pollen transfer, which is what you need to have happen.
Yeah, the borage and the tomatillos took over my yard. I remember that. All right. You're right. Tomatillos are very easy to grow. You look for that papery husk around the fruit that begins to dry when the fruits are maturing, and probably when they're firm to the touch but seem to give a little, and also the ripe fruits will pull fairly easily from the plant.
They can be eaten raw or they can be cooked. The flavor, which I think of as being maybe a little on the sour side, but they can be cooked, they can be grilled, they can be put on a kebab, they can be cut up and put in salsa. There are lots of uses for them if you find them pleasant to eat.
Yeah, you could can up green salsa with them.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's a very popular recipe. And I guess as long as you like cilantro, you'll probably like tomatillos.
Yeah, well, I don't know if you have to like cilantro to like tomatillos.
Oh.
I think you can like tomatillos separately. But they're very easy to grow. They basically follow the same cultural patterns as a tomato from seed. Full sun, warm nights, 50, 55 minimum, and that your nights should settle at 50 to 55 degrees minimum. And they even like it warmer than that. So full sun, lots of heat, and And spacing, they can get to be pretty good sized plants, maybe not as big as a tomato, but 2 feet apart. Yeah, 2 feet plus apart in all directions. You can put a cage up. I've grown them without a cage and not had a problem, but obviously they'll take a little more space if they're not caged.
That was my problem, is I was growing them in the soil. Mm-hmm. And they kind of spread.
Mm-hmm. They laid down?
Yeah, they lay down.
So they weren't caged. They laid down.
They laid down. And I was just doing it on a lark.
Of course, you've got to do some of that stuff to make it all new and interesting.
Yeah. And I think I noted at the time, note to self, cage these in the future.
Yes. Things can happen when you cage a plant, like it gets very dense in that cage, and then that gives insects and a place to hide, and it allows water, if you are using any sort of overhead irrigation, it allows water to get trapped between leaves or on top of leaves, and that can increase your disease instance. So I shouldn't say cages are always wonderful, but cages make gardening neater.
Yeah, we should point out, speaking of diseases, that tomatillos are susceptible to many of the same diseases as tomatoes.
Right. So you want to rotate your garden. Mm-hmm. You wouldn't want to plant the tomatillos where you have already planted or in the previous season planted a tomato. And it's better if you have not planted a tomato in that spot for the previous 2 seasons. In small gardens, that's not always doable, but you can always also grow them in a container, a large container, a 15-gallon mm-hmm. or a half-barrel container, and they will take more watering, more frequent irrigation in that situation, but it is doable.
Tomatillos are easy to grow, and as long as they don't make you sick, go ahead and plant them.
Yes.
All right, Brenda, I hope that helps. A lot of good tomatillo varieties out there. Debbie, thanks for your help.
Always a pleasure, Fred.
Have you taken a look at the Garden Basics with Farmer Fred Beyond the Basics newsletter yet? It's a deeper dive into what was discussed on the podcast, along with more great gardening information. It really is going beyond the basics. In the edition of the newsletter that comes out this Friday, March 18th, we chat with renowned chef and master gardener Andy McDonald. She was cooking up vegan gumbo out at the Fair Oaks Horticulture Center on an open garden day for the staff. A gumbo, of course, so you can use up a lot of what you harvest from your garden and put that in a gumbo. After all, you grew it, now eat it. That gumbo, I gotta tell you, smelled so good, I wanted to share it with you in Friday's Beyond Basics newsletter. Of course, they haven't installed digital aromas yet. So, besides talking with Andy about her vegan gumbo recipe, we'll have that recipe as well in the newsletter. It's what's cooking in the latest Garden Basics with Farmer Fred newsletter, Beyond the Basics, out Friday, March 18th. Find a link in the podcast show notes or at farmerfred.com or by going to substack.com/gardenbasics. Think of it as your garden resource that goes beyond the basics. It's the Garden Basics with Farmer Fred newsletter, and it's free. Please subscribe, share it with your gardening friends and family. The Garden Basics with Farmer Fred newsletter, Beyond the Basics. And by the way, thank you for listening. Garden Basics comes out every Tuesday and Friday. It's brought to you by Smart Pots. Garden Basics is available wherever podcasts are handed out, and that includes Apple, iHeart, Stitcher, Spotify, Overcast, Google, Podcast Addict, CastBox, and Pocket Casts. Thank you for listening, subscribing, and leaving comments. We appreciate it.